I grew up believing that demons were real, and not just real, but like actively manipulating world events and people. And this wasn't happening by accident, but it was happening because there was a cosmic war being waged between ultimate good and ultimate evil. And within this worldview, if you weren't on God's side, you were on Satan's. And so scientists and most specifically like those who taught the theory of evolution and secular institutions and the media and even Democrats and many others, they weren't just wrong. They were evil because they were actively fighting on the side of Satan in this cosmic struggle. We believed that the end times would begin at any moment. And when I look back, I don't think fundamentalism was really based on faith. I think it was based on fear. This is the Silent Republic. The truth is that the world can be a scary place, and if you turn on the news for 5 minutes, you'll see plenty of war and corruption, death and violence, and people treating one another horribly. And so there are real dangers in the world, but what fundamentalism tends to do is it filters everything through this lens. And so everything, including non-threats, become viewed as dangerous. Growing up, science, and most specifically the theory of evolution, it wasn't something we just disagreed with. We viewed it as a spiritual danger, one that could potentially pull you away from God, make you lose your faith and lose your salvation. And we were deeply suspicious of outsiders. And by outsiders, I mean secular people in general, people outside of the church. And so this led to a very isolating upbringing where we were discouraged from having friends that weren't Christian and maybe even weren't the type of Christian or homeschoolers like we were. And the fear was that these secular people would be a bad influence on us. The world became something to avoid. And even those words, the world, they were used as almost a euphemism for evil. The world was evil. The world wasn't a place to explore or try to understand. It was a minefield, a place of danger where you were constantly having to tiptoe around to avoid the traps, the evil, a place where spiritual threats were lurking around every single corner. And this is where things become complicated because the world can be a very dangerous place. Like, predators are real. People that take advantage of you are real. People that want to do you harm are real. Bad things happen all the time. And so, like, that part of life, that part of the world is real. But navigating a world that can be both beautiful and dangerous, it requires nuance. It requires holding multiple truths simultaneously. And what fundamentalism does is it collapses all this nuance into simple binaries, truth and deception, us and them. And once you begin seeing the world like this, fear isn't just an occasional emotion. It is the lens through which you see everything. The entire world is viewed through this lens. But the question is why? Why is fear so central to fundamentalism? And while I'm talking about Christian fundamentalism, because that's what I know best, I mean, this applies to fundamentalist Islam, certain political movements, conspiracy culture, even revolutionary movements, and the details change, but I don't think the psychology does. So why does fear become so important? Firstly, because I think fear creates social cohesion. Communities are not bound only by what they believe, but they are bound by what they fear and what they view as a threat, what they oppose. Fear creates a shared enemy, and shared enemies are extremely powerful for group identity. Secondly, fear creates a dependence on authority because when people are afraid, they look for security, they look for protection. And authority is always ready to grant that to people that are afraid. And within many fundamentalist traditions, authority takes the form of God Himself but even priests and pastors, holy scripture and tradition. Fear fits naturally into a system that prioritizes obedience because fear makes authority feel necessary. And the relationship becomes self reinforcing because authority identifies dangers, and then fear grows. And then more power is given to authority, which continues to identify more fear or new fears. And so the cycle continues. But I think there's an even deeper reason because the world is a complicated place. And like I said earlier, the world is both beautiful and terrifying. And most things don't fit neatly into simple categories. People are complicated. History is complicated. Politics is complicated. Society is complicated. Reality can be ambiguous, but fear demands certainty. And so complexity gets collapsed into simple binaries of us versus them, good versus evil, saved versus unsaved, truth versus lies. And the comfort of these categories is actually difficult to overstate because certainty feels safe in a world that is difficult to navigate and chaotic. Certainty grounds an individual and it feels safe to them. And so in a world where you know who the good guys are, who the bad guys are, what your purpose is and what your place is in relationship to everything else, fear isn't just an emotion. It's not something you experience. Fear can, strangely enough, become comforting. You can become so used to it that it becomes the status quo. Because even when everything around you is terrifying, certainty offers something powerful to you. It is order, a sense of meaning, a sense that someone somewhere has the answers. The cost of this worldview is very real, and many people never leave it. Many people probably don't even want to leave it, but I did. And I think that's because my brain is just like wired to see patterns everywhere. And when I noticed that the patterns I was raised to see didn't actually map onto reality very well, I started questioning everything. And I think I'm more comfortable with ambiguity than a lot of people are. I think I'm fairly comfortable with saying I don't know rather than a lot of people. And I think seeking the truth, funnily enough, is oftentimes being willing to say, I don't know. But now looking back from the other side, I can see what this fundamentalist way of thinking took from me. And it took some of the things I now value most in life. It stole my curiosity because within Christian fundamentalism, the answers are given before the questions are even asked. And some questions are dangerous, sometimes physically, but most often spiritually, because the wrong question can lead you down the wrong path. But I've always been curious. I want to know why, and I want to know how. Like, how do things work? Why do they work? And after leaving fundamentalism, I felt like I could finally breathe. Like I could ask those questions. And I was no longer afraid to ask those questions. And I was no longer afraid to follow the truth wherever it led. And I was no longer afraid to just stand wherever that was. There's no doctrine telling me what conclusion I must arrive to. No theological guardrails that I have to worry about. I am free to be curious. And that curiosity leads to something else that fundamentalism took from me. And that is wonder. Today, I can look into the night sky and I can be amazed, not because I have all the answers, but actually because I don't. I can think about the age of the universe and the unimaginable spans of time and the billions of people that have come before me. And it's in those moments that I have the closest thing to a spiritual experience at this point. But my relationships changed too because as a fundamentalism, I was living in constant judgment of myself, others, of any group that wasn't squarely within this fundamentalist worldview. Now I can engage with people as they are, not as projects or as potential converts or as people from another tribe, but simply as people, as my fellow man. I have lost friendships that were built on a shared belief, but I have gained friendships that are now built on genuine connection. And I love more honestly now because I no longer believe that this life is simply like a waiting room for the next one. I believe that most likely this is it, which means like now matters, right now matters, and the people I love matter, and the experience itself is all we have, so it matters. I think it's impermanence that makes life beautiful. Knowing that it ends is what makes it precious. And a final thing I gained was intellectual honesty because I don't have to believe something because I'm supposed to, and I don't have to decide my position on something before I've examined the evidence. I am free to seek, free to doubt, free to change my mind. And though I lose certainty with this worldview, I would trade certainty for wonder every single time. I will take curiosity over dogma, and I will take honest questions over easy answers. And I didn't leave fundamentalism because I stopped asking questions. I left fundamentalism because I started asking them. This is the Silent Republic.